This may be the most important speech I've ever made.
President Trump takes to social media with his fight for a second term. The U.S. records the highest number of deaths from coronavirus since the pandemic began. A mass commemorating the missionaries murdered 40 years ago in El Salvador is held at St. Michael's in Flushing. And after being wrongly imprisoned, Cardinal George Pell is now looking to the future with the help of faith and family. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. President Donald Trump takes to social media to deliver what he says may be the most important speech he's ever made. He says he wants to restore faith and confidence in American elections, which he claims is under assault.
If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
In a 46-minute speech posted to Facebook and Twitter, President Donald Trump reiterated claims of voter fraud and irregularities that he says took place during what he called a ridiculously long November 3rd election.
We used to have what was called Election Day. Now we have election days, weeks and months, and lots of bad things happened during this ridiculous period of time.
At one point, President Trump used a chart to show how he went from leading by a lot in Wisconsin to losing by a little. He claims there's evidence that the election results are wrong, particularly in swing states.
Dozens of counties in the key swing states have more registered voters on the rolls than they have voting-age citizens.
This speech taking place on the same day President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, appeared before the Michigan House Oversight Committee. Giuliani alleging that Democrats led a concerted effort to steal the election across the country, including in Detroit, where Biden won by a large margin.
This is a swindle. It's a con job. It's a theft of an election. And it was carried out by the same method in the city of Detroit. Not the first one they stole, not the last one they're going to steal unless you do something about it.
Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Attorney General William Barr said the Justice Department had so far not seen fraud on a scale that would change the outcome of the election. And recounts in Wisconsin and Georgia also didn't change the results. Georgia's election implementation manager, who is Republican, had this to say.
I mean, it's Looney Tunes. The president's literally coming to Georgia to campaign for the same two senators that his two former lawyers who are filing lawsuits to contest the election with the same claims the president made in his very long 46-minute video yesterday that have already been debunked. I'm speechless. That's the best I got right now.
Some Trump allies are calling for people in Georgia to boycott the Senate runoffs. But if Republicans lose those seats, Democrats would take control of the Senate. Meanwhile, projected presidential winner Joe Biden is focusing now on putting his team together to battle COVID-19. He's expected to announce his Health and Human Services Secretary next week. In the running, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who co-chairs Biden's coronavirus task force. Rhode Island Democratic Governor Gina Raimondo is also said to be a contender. Biden is also expected to name a top-level White House advisor to coordinate the government's coronavirus response. Dr. Anthony Fauci is meeting today with members of the Biden transition team. This as the U.S. reaches a grim new milestone, the highest death toll since the start of the pandemic. On Wednesday, 2,885 Americans died. Karen Kafa has the latest.
A grim picture now, a dark outlook ahead.
This is a very, very difficult and dangerous time, and if we don't change our ways, this will not be the top of the curve.
More than 2,800 Americans lost their lives to COVID-19 on Wednesday, the highest daily death toll of the pandemic. The American Ambulance Association says the 911 emergency call system is at a breaking point. The number of new daily cases and hospitalizations is also soaring.
Doctors, nurses, respiratory techs, they are tired. They are stressed. They are pushed to the limit.
The Biden-Harris administration will take control of the U.S. response to the pandemic in 7 weeks. And the nation's top infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, met with the transition team virtually on Thursday. This as states prepare to receive their first vaccine doses, pending the federal government's sign-off, which could come next week.
Healthcare workers, residents of long-term care facilities and nursing homes, essential workers, and people over 65 is who's in that first group. That's a huge group of Americans.
In Washington, Karen Kafa, Currents News.
Jobless claims hit a pandemic-era low last week. There were 712,000 claims for unemployment compared to 787,000 the week before. That dropped total claims to 5.5 million, down from 6.1 million in the prior week. The weekly total, though, is still well above the record level prior to the pandemic. Pfizer now says it expects to slash the number of vaccines it ships this year in half. The Wall Street Journal reports the pharmaceutical giant is blaming supply chain problems. It had hoped to roll out 100 million vaccines worldwide by the end of the year. Now it will be 50 million. But the company says it will roll out more than 1 billion doses in 2021. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced today when COVID vaccines will be delivered to New York City.
We expect the first shipments as early as December 15th. That is 12 days from now. The Pfizer vaccine shipments we expect to begin for New York City. Moderna shipments a week later on the 22nd.
The mayor says the first shipment will include 254,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, followed by 211,000 doses of Moderna's. The city is working with the state on the distribution plan, but he expects healthcare workers and nursing home patients will be the first to be vaccinated. Mayor de Blasio is also defending his decision to not provide funding for COVID testing to Catholic schools. This comes as the Archdiocese of New York won a lawsuit requiring the Department of Education to provide the same quality of testing in both private and public schools. The mayor telling the New York Post that it is not the city's obligation to provide the service. 40 years ago, 4 missionary women were brutally murdered while civil war raged in El Salvador. Even all these decades later, the sacrifice they made during their service is still being remembered around the world. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports from a heartfelt memorial mass in Flushing, Queens.
The day after Raul Hidalgo arrived in the United States from El Salvador, he was sitting in the pews at St. Michael's Church in Flushing. 39 years later, he's still here. He's never returned home.
Sometimes I cry for many things that are happening even now in my country. We haven't had peace in more than 40 years.
Raul remembers the beginning of El Salvador's bloody civil war and the violence that plagued his country.
Things got really scary at that time. You know, I remember exactly when Monsignor Romero was killed in 1980.
Months later, these 4 women were killed. Maura Clark and Ida Ford, Mary Knowles sisters from the Diocese of Brooklyn, Dorothy Kazel, an Ursuline sister, and Jean Donovan, a lay missionary.
Killing the sisters, that was another big hit because it was not right what the government was doing at that time in my country.
While in El Salvador on a mission to help the poor, the women were brutally murdered. 40 years later, their memory is still alive at St. Michael's.
The 4 women made a commitment to be in that country at that time, even though there was much violence going on, so it's important that we never forget them.
At a mass for the women on the anniversary of their deaths, Monsignor John Vesey, who has spent decades doing missionary work in Paraguay, Guatemala, and China, said their legacy has new meaning in today's world.
These women risked their lives in a civil war to serve people. We are in a pandemic now. How many of us are risking our lives to serve the people? This is the challenge that I believe that they're giving the church today.
Raul and his family pray the peace the slain women sought to bring to El Salvador will finally come.
One day we will have that peace that we all want. Hopefully nothing of these was in vain.
But for now, they're still waiting. In Flushing, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. Bishop DiMarzio is here with what's next after the diocese's big win at the Supreme Court on church COVID restrictions. The Holy Father releases a video to go along with his December prayer intention for a life of prayer. And Cardinal George Pell is back at the Vatican reflecting on his wrongful imprisonment on abuse charges and looking to what's ahead.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
The Diocese of Brooklyn achieved a landmark win in the fight for religious freedom after the Supreme Court ruled that the governor's restrictions on the Mass were unconstitutional. But what does this mean now for churches in our diocese and the future of the liturgy during the COVID pandemic? Here to answer some of those questions, the Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, who joins Ed Wilkinson for this week's Into the Deep. Ed.
Thank you, Christine. And we're going to talk to Bishop DiMarzio today about the recent Supreme Court ruling in favor of the Diocese of Brooklyn over the state of New York about some restrictions on the COVID pandemic. So, Bishop, some people are calling this a landmark ruling, and people like Governor Cuomo says it's really a moot point because the restrictions have already been lifted. So what say you?
Well, the truth is the restrictions have been lifted, but they can be imposed at any time in the future. And the issue was the policy that as a First Amendment right, we have the right to worship, and that the government cannot treat us any differently than secular entities if they're doing something to restrict the infection by a pandemic or any other thing that could happen. And the Supreme Court agreed with us that we were not being treated equally and fairly. And so we are actually having another hearing on the 18th of December. Your prayers for that, please. And that'll be in the Second Circuit, back to them, a full hearing. And then we will go back to the Supreme Court for their final decision. Mm-hmm. But right now, it looks like the Supreme Court is agreeing with us. They're agreeing with the policy issue that we are an essential service and that we should be given some leeway with all the restrictions necessary for health, but we should have a different situation than secular things, for example, movie theaters, bowling alleys, things that are not really essential. We've been categorized with them. Mm-hmm.
The diocese is not trying to defy the state regulations, right? No. I mean, we've been right in step through all of these things.
No, we've gone beyond what we've been asked to do to make sure that no one gets sick when they come to church. And again, reminding everybody that the dispensation from coming to Mass is in effect till the end of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So we're not forcing anybody back. We just want to have those people who want to come and have the priest available in church to be able to minister to their people.
But you're saying that if the governor puts more restrictions again, like the pandemic seems to be getting worse again, crisis is getting worse. If the governor puts more restrictions in, he could go back and put more restrictions on churches and places of worship?
Now we can't. Not really. We would still be exempt, at least until the 18th, until we see what happens. So right now we're open to.
The Daily News editorial board said that the Supreme Court got it wrong, and they said that a ruling like this opens us up to a greater health crisis. What do you think about that?
Well, they got it wrong themselves. The New York Times actually had an editorial yesterday, or an op-ed piece, where two lawyers from a secular university agreed that this was a momentous decision on the part of the Supreme Court in support of the First Amendment rights. We will not spread the virus because we are safe as any place else today when people gather with the mask, with the cleaning, the social distancing. I never was our intention to flaunt the rules or to put anybody in danger.
What has been your perception? Have people been coming back to the parishes for Mass, or what kind of crowds have been coming to the churches?
It depends on the place. Again, if you have a lot of seniors in a particular area, there's less people coming back. They're exercising caution, which they should. They have underlying conditions, especially. They really don't need to catch this, so they have to be extra careful. But again, there are young people. There are others who can come back, and there are people who already had it who have the antibodies. So there are a lot of people who can come back, and if they wish, they can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Bishop, thanks for clearing that up, and we'll talk more about this, but right now we're going back to the news desk.
Thanks, Ed. In the Pope's latest video message, His Holiness emphasized how prayer can lead to change.
Para que nuestra relación con Jesucristo se alimente de la palabra de Dios y de una vida de oración. In silenzio tutti. Ognuno prega col cuore.
In a year marked by the global COVID-19 pandemic, Pope Francis is encouraging others to use prayer as a way to change reality and our hearts, saying prayer is key to entering into dialogue with Jesus Christ. Celebrating International Day of Persons with Disabilities, Pope Francis insisted that all Catholics with disabilities should have the right to receive the sacraments, suggesting that parishes should make efforts to welcome and train those with disabilities to serve as catechists. The UN established the day of observance in 1981 and estimates that 15% of the world's current population lives with disabilities. A top Vatican official back in Rome now after spending more than a year in jail. Cardinal George Pell, once the Holy See's Secretariat for Economy, was wrongly imprisoned for charges of sexual abuse. Now he's rebuilding his life with the help of faith, family, and his church. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports.
Cardinal George Pell is back in Rome after being released from prison in April. For 404 days, Cardinal Pell sat isolated in a prison cell, wrongly convicted of sexual abuse based on a single testimony against him.
The case that was referred to the judges, I thought, was ridiculous, totally implausible in a great cathedral.
During his time in prison, Cardinal Pell wrote of his suffering in a diary he's decided to make public. He also wrote to other prisoners about their shared experiences.
I tried to write to all the prisoners, respond to all the prisoners, hardly anybody else. One or two others I replied to.
Reflecting on the worst period of his life, Cardinal Pell says what got him through was the support from his family and his church.
Pope Francis supported me strongly through all these troubles. I had a very pleasant meeting with him, and I'm very grateful for his support and for the support of Pope Benedict.
While in prison, Cardinal Pell's reputation shattered, his future uncertain, but his faith never wavered.
Jesus' teachings are true and bear fruit and give life, give you strength. The importance of forgiveness, of struggling to forgive, is good for peace of heart and peace of mind.
The first volume of Cardinal Pell's diary, titled Prison Journal, will be released on December 15th. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News, it's the Advent season, and while this year is far from typical, you can make this time more meaningful. We'll tell you how. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The Advent season has begun, and although this year it's not typical, it can actually be more meaningful. Ascension, which creates faith formation programs, is holding its Advent series online this holiday season and is inviting you to join them. Father Mark Toops, Vicar General for the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux, joins us now to tell us all about it. And Father Toops, this is the third year for the Advent program, but the first time it's virtual because of COVID. You say there's a silver lining to that.
Absolutely. I think that for many of us, at least for myself, 2020 has been a very difficult year, and I have been at the same time more separated from community and the people that I long to be with, and at the same time I want to be with them, especially at this time of year. And so I think what the opportunity for us to gather online does is it gives people a chance to feel connected to other people at a time when we need it the most. And I think all of us at this stage of this particular year need something to hold on to with hope.
Absolutely, and everybody from all over the country can now join you. And the live sessions
Yes.
are free and open for anyone to watch on YouTube, but you can step it up by getting a copy of this journal to use along with the videos. Tell us what people can expect.
They can expect to go on a journey, and I think that that's exciting for all of us. The journal, which you just showed, is comprised of daily meditations, which are small, about 500 words. You can read it very quickly in the morning, and I summarize every one of the reflections in one word. So you can almost kind of like steep like a tea bag in that all day long, just kind of let that kind of swim through your heart. And as you take one day at a time, you're going to get to know the person of Mary and the person of Joseph and learn more about their marriage. Year one was about Mary, year two was about Joseph, and this year we're going to get to know more about them as a married couple, the dynamics of their marriage, and how that influenced the way that they prepared for the very first Advent and for the birth of Christ. So you can expect to get to know Mary and Joseph in a way that you've never received them before.
So interesting. Why do you think programs like this are so important in preparing for Christmas, especially this year?
Because I think all of us, it's tempting either for us to do this year what we've always done, and I can't tell you how many times my life has no more been changed on December 26th than it was on December 24th. So it's easy for us to get into routine. And I think the way that we can, you might say, try something different is to get to know the people who prepared for the very first Advent. For others of us, I think we're just looking for some direction right now. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who they need direction on how to get through these times. And what the journal offers is that it gives some direction, some coaching on your prayer, and gives you something very concrete to do at a time when I think a lot of people need some clear direction on how to get through this holiday season.
Right. So how can people watching now get involved in this Advent series?
We're live every Sunday night. They can go to rejoiceprogram.com to find out information about everything that's going on. If they have not yet had a chance to order the journal and they would like an ebook, they can go to rejoiceprogram.com and download that very easily. There's some beautiful artwork that's with that kind of helps you meditate on something. But every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be live together. We're going to light the Advent wreath. We're going to talk a little bit about the gospel, knowing that some people have not yet had a chance to go to Mass at this stage of COVID restrictions. And so we're going to unpack the gospel, pray a little bit together, offer some spiritual direction. That's every Sunday night at 8 p.m. during the Advent season. And they can go to rejoiceprogram.com to find out more.
Wow, it sounds so nice. Definitely going to check it out. Father Mark Toups, Vicar General for the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux. Thanks so much for being with us and sharing this with us.
God bless you.
Again, if you're interested in the Rejoice series, head over to rejoiceprogram.com. You can use the promo code ART10 to get 10% off of any of the beautiful prints in the Rejoice collection. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.